Right now, if someone told you to walk into a jungle, hand over your passport, and drink from a cup someone else poured for you, you'd say no, obviously. But 900 people didn't. This isn't ancient history. This happened less than 50 years ago in a jungle clearing most people had never heard of, and it remains one of the largest mass suicides in modern history. So the question is, how does one man convince nearly 1,000 people, teachers, nurses, children, grandparents, to willingly end their own lives? Let's go back to the beginning. In the 1950s, a young preacher named Jim Jones started a small congregation in Indiana called the People's Temple. And here's the thing. At first, it wasn't some obvious cult warning sign. Jones actually preached racial integration at a time when that was radical and dangerous in America. He ran soup kitchens. He helped people find jobs. He built genuine trust with working-class families, especially black families who felt abandoned by mainstream churches. That trust is exactly what made everything after so effective. By the 1970s, Jones had moved his congregation to California, and his sermons started shifting. He began claiming he could heal the sick. He staged fake miracles using planted actors. He positioned himself not just as a pastor, but as a prophet, someone chosen to lead his followers into a better world. Here's what makes this so important. Jones didn't build power through force. He built it through community, purpose, and belonging, and only once people were fully dependent on him did the control begin to tighten. Followers were pressured to sign over their homes, their paychecks, their savings. Families were slowly isolated from relatives outside the church. Jones read followers' private letters. He staged loyalty tests. He humiliated members publicly to break down their confidence, and then offered himself as the only person who could rebuild it. Think about that. Total dependency built one small concession at a time. By 1977, facing growing media scrutiny and a defector-led investigation back in the U.S., Jones relocated hundreds of followers to a remote jungle compound in Guyana, South America. He called it Jonestown. On paper, it was an agricultural commune. In reality, it was almost impossible to leave. The compound had no real fence, but it didn't need one. It was surrounded by dense, disorienting jungle, hundreds of miles from any city, with armed guards patrolling the perimeter and passports confiscated on arrival. But here's the but. Word got out anyway. In November 1978, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan flew to Guyana to investigate reports of abuse after receiving desperate letters smuggled out by relatives of temple members. He toured Jonestown, and at first, things looked calm, even staged. But as he prepared to leave, several temple members quietly approached him, begging to leave with his group. That request triggered everything. As Ryan's party attempted to depart from a nearby airstrip, temple gunmen opened fire, killing Congressman Ryan and 4 others. To this day, he remains the only sitting member of Congress ever assassinated in the line of duty. Jones knew this meant the end. Government scrutiny, likely federal intervention. His entire world was about to collapse. So he gathered his followers for what he called revolutionary suicide, a vat of grape-flavored drink, a powdered mix called Flavor Aid, not the more famous Kool-Aid brand people often assume, was mixed with cyanide and sedatives. Armed guards stood at the perimeter of the gathering, not to protect the group, but to make sure no one ran. Parents were told to give the mixture to their children first. Audio recordings from that day. Yes, they exist. Capture Jones calmly telling his followers that dying was an act of dignity, that the outside world would never understand them, that this was the only path left. Within hours, 909 people were dead. Over 300 of them were children. Here's what makes this genuinely staggering. Investigators later found evidence that some members were injected against their will. This wasn't purely voluntary for everyone in that clearing. For some, it was murder wearing the mask of suicide. Same story, different century. Absolute power rarely announces itself as dangerous. It usually arrives wearing kindness first. So here's the full picture. A preacher who built real trust through real community work. A slow tightening of isolation and control. A remote jungle compound designed to make leaving nearly impossible. A single act of violence against a congressman that sealed everyone's fate. And an ending engineered by one man who convinced hundreds of parents that killing their own children was an act of love. So back to right now, to the idea that this could never happen to you. That's exactly what every person in Jonestown would have said years before they arrived there. Nobody walks into a cult. They walk into a community, a purpose, a family, and by the time control tightens, leaving no longer feels like a choice. The people who died in that jungle clearing weren't unusually gullible or weak. They were ordinary people who wanted to belong to something. And that want is universal enough that under the right or wrong circumstances, it could happen again. If that unsettles you a little, there's a lot more history like this where it came from.